user interface will become so intuitive that the need to learn about IT to use it will become very minimal.
Hello, and welcome to the U20 Dialogue series. I'm your host Punit Gandhi from NIUA, and we are excited to bring to you a series of discussions on various urban development challenges faced by cities across the world and its potential solutions. This month, we will talk to experts working in the urban sector on the theme of catalyzing digital urban futures in cities. And today we have with us Mr. Vikas Kanungo, who's senior consultant for the World Bank Group for Digital Development and Global Practices. Welcome to the show, Mr. Vikas, and it would be great if you could just give us a brief background about yourself and the work you do with the Digital Development Global Practices.
Thank you, Puneet. Well, by way of introduction, my name is Vikas Kanungo. I work with the Digital Development Global Practice of the World Bank since 2008. So this has been around 11 years now. Before that, I have worked with the European Commission and helped them create a e-governance policy till 2050 for the European Union. And I've also worked as an advisor with the Government of India in helping them formulate their mobile governance policy, and with UNDP in helping India enhance their public service delivery. In addition to that, I've worked with more than 20 organizations across the world, but largely in the domain of ICT, starting from the time when computers were used on a DOS operating system to the time now when we're talking about Industry 4.0, robotics, and all those things.
I think it would be a great start to set a context of what is digital governance and what is digital urban governance for the audience.
Two things. Digital governance basically would be, in very simple words, to deliver public services in the pocket of citizens, where they need their mobile phones. So moving from era where for every service you have to visit a particular department of government, for water you go to water department, for electricity you go to electricity department, for other services so there are multitude of departments you had to go before the digital governance came in. But with digital governance, you don't need to know which department you have to go to. You just ask for a service, and the system finds the relevant department and the officers for you based upon the information you provide. So this is basically a concept of where the government reaches out to the citizens rather than the citizens reaching to the government. Now, in the context of urban, in cities so far, the definition of urban governance was limited to what a ULB or urban local body delivers. But as we all know that in a city, you also have health department, which may not be under the ULB. You have roads department, you have traffic police, you have normal police, which may or may not come under the jurisdiction of a urban local body. So when we are talking about our urban governance or the smart cities, we are applying concept of digital governance at a city level, where the city becomes a platform for delivering multiple services to citizens, while on the back end, all these departments collaborate and integrate with each other so that the whole of government or a uniform experience can be provided to citizens.
Okay. And if we have to look at it, I think I'm sure that a lot of things have already happened in India also on these lines. We have also come up with something like Aadhaar, and now NDHM, National Digital Health Mission, is being talked about, and a lot of other services which have been digitized and which are technically at a lot of top levels that have come up from the center. Do you see such kind of things getting taken up by the urban body as well, or state body as well, to promote such kind of digital initiatives?
Yes, in fact, if you look at the first stage of digital governance,
Hmm.
the focus was largely on services which were ad hoc services. Say, for example, you put up a huge digital infrastructure to provide birth and death certificates. Or
Yeah.
in case of municipalities, I'll talk only about municipal services for a clarity. You talk about paying your property taxes, your water bills or electricity bills. These are
Hmm.
the services which basically are called ad hoc services because for birth and death, the interaction of a citizen with the system is only once in a lifetime.
Yeah.
Or your domicile certificates, again, once in a lifetime. For property tax, once in a year. For
Hmm.
electricity, once in a month. But with majority of the digital governance or the city governance using the digital means, people now look for day-to-day services. Say, for example, having transport in a city through multiple modes, whether it is bus, metro, or any other means. The citizen
Hmm.
wants the government to provide a seamless service for that, to
Yeah.
be able have Wi-Fi's hotspots while moving around in the city,
Yeah.
finding out information about a place where you are. So with digital governance advancement, we have now moved to a stage where we are providing day-to-day services to the citizens based upon demand rather than the earlier monolithic and ad hoc services. So that's a big change that has come over these years, at least at the cities level, where the penetration of smartphones and mobile devices is much more compared to the rural areas.
Okay. So what are some of the major challenges do you see from your perspective in developing such things for the cities? And where do they lie as of right now in current context?
So see, basically till now we had been talking about the services which could widely be put under an umbrella of e-governance services.
Yeah.
Now with Industry 4.0 technologies available with, say, for example, cameras, video cameras being installed in the entire city, the sensors for the water network, etc., we
Hmm.
have now entered an era where e-governance services have only become a very small part of all the services which citizens want.
Yeah.
With these Industry 4.0 technologies, we are talking about now cyber physical integration, which
Hmm.
means we're trying to make our brick and mortar infrastructure smart by
Yeah.
putting sensors. For example, nowadays, this is a common place in most of the cities where the street lights automatically, become on once the density of light from the sun goes, and the
Yeah.
moment that density increases, the lights go off automatically. You don't need any person from the municipality to be able to do it, which they used to do earlier, and each pole had a switch which had to be put on. Now with cyber physical integration, we've made this entire street light system smart, which can understand when it has to go up. And one step further, in some of the advanced countries like South Korea, etc., where
Yeah.
the street lighting also manages its intensity based upon the profile of an area.
Okay.
So if there is an area where the crimes are more common, the lighting intensity in the night increases so that the place is well lit. Or
Yeah.
if somewhere doing some festival, etc., the lighting can be changed based upon the mood, and you don't have to do it manually. The information fed in the system is used by an artificial intelligence module to do all these things for you.
Hmm.
Similarly, the poles have these voice sensors. So the moment you hear a loud voice like a gunshot, automatically police is informed and the pole is able to tell the location as to where incident has happened. So
Okay.
now are moving into an area where the systems or the brick and mortar infrastructure becomes smart, so that the government delivers services on a proactive basis without a citizen even demanding it, which was not the case earlier. Earlier, you had to first request for a service, wait for somebody to look at your request and then deliver the service. Now the system knows, based upon who you are, where you are, and why you are there, as to what service you might require, and offers it proactively.
Okay. And that is where I see, like, now a lot of services are also called on lines of major words like AI, ML, or blockchain are coming into to facilitate such kind of direct benefits for either managing the services or managing any other form of requirement for the city governments. At the same time, we are also talking about the integration of biometric and face recognition and things like that. That this will always work in the background, which citizens never know of it, and most of the time they don't know. But when we are talking about cameras recording, or basically traffic signals, now have most of them have good amount of cameras on roads which can monitor that if you have broken the signal, you can get a fine for it. So what other kinds of direct, apart from facial recognition and biometric, what kind of use cases do you see coming out of this whole ecosystem?
So basically, the way where I see this moving, based upon what is happening in some of the countries which are on top of smart services index, is where a citizen would be in a position to personalize the services for himself.
Okay.
Uh, Through an interface providers, which means two things. One, personalize, and second, do this personalization in real time, which means if I am traveling to the airport today,
Yeah.
and I might need a wheelchair, which means I will have to disclose my information about being a disabled. So, but I may need to disclose that information only for availing this service. Otherwise, maybe I want to keep it private to myself. So I'm able to personalize a service by giving a consent at one time for using my data. And after utilizing that service, withdraw that consent, so that particular information which I have shared may not be used for any other purpose. So it would be, going forward, we will soon see a scenario in next 5 to 10 years where each of the citizen would be able to personalize the government interface as per their own choice and preferences, not only for sharing information, but also the channel of choice. Say, for example, if I'm not very digitally literate and I want the services to be delivered to me through an IVR channel where I can speak in my language and interact with the system, or something which in India may not be seen immediately, but globally, if you see this entire cycle of development, we have moved from desktops to laptops to palm tops to mobiles, and the next cycle would be the embedded systems, especially the, I think, COVID outbreak. This entire development of having embedded systems is now has picked up the pace like never before. So maybe in very near future, we will have some system embedded onto our body which can tell whether we have a fever or we are going to need a doctor. Our location, our pulse rate, our temperature, everything. This is being used in some of the countries, but wherever it is being used, those countries at the moment are not very democratic countries where this has been enforced onto the citizens. So we will still need to get this technology matured enough where I can use it at my own choice rather than being enforced on me by the administration.
Okay. So here then comes a part where citizens directly have to interact and understand these processes. And that is where, no doubt now with mobile penetration going high, having Geo as well on the market and decreasing the price of internet has helped in
better penetration of internet as well. How does that translate into adopting to these services? Because that is still something which is lacking at a lot of places. So how can that kind of incentivization be built so that more and more people can come in, not only people who are educated, but also people who are at the bottom of the pyramid and would require a lot of different benefits from the government? How can those be integrated into this whole ecosystem in urban areas?
So I think that's very, very important question, and also till very recently been a challenge to many governments. You have very low digital literacy at rural areas. There are language issues. How do you make sure that everybody has equal access to these services? But now, with design thinking, with artificial intelligence, the scenario can totally be turned on its head. Instead of the requirement of citizens having to learn digital skills, would make machines learn about how citizens interact.
Okay.
That is where new kind of interfaces will be seen in near future, where, as I said, these smart systems can know, since we have your identity with your consent, we have your documents in your digital locker, for which you can give a consent to, provide specific information you want. The system can proactively know what kind of a service you might require and which is the channel of choice. So digital literacy no more would mean that you will need to learn interacting with very complicated software applications, but it would be as easy as writing a message on a WhatsApp group, or if you cannot even write, you're not even literate otherwise, you can speak and demand a service. So those things are still on the maturity curve, but very soon I think digital literacy would mean the machine having to learn what a citizen might want and how to interact with the citizens, as much as the humans will need to learn to interact with the machines. But with design thinking, it's going to be much and much easier, because if you see generation now, if I give a iPhone or a good smartphone to a kid, without teaching it, is able to figure out how to use it. So the user interfaces are becoming that much intuitive and smart to make it easier for people. So of course, digital literacy in terms of awareness to use these systems still will need to be done by the governments, and that is going to be a huge task.
Yeah.
But it is going to be that complicated for the people to be able to interact with digital systems.
Okay. But then how do ULBs and state government become part of it? Because currently we do see that a lot of such initiatives are again there on the national level as well, that we are trying to build up urban data exchange, or in urban innovation stack, or citizen centric smart governance. So there are a lot of initiatives already in place for them, but we also need that kind of capacity on the ground to make sure that that can be developed. And then the comes the part of where this usage will come in, where design thinking and everything will help us. So how do we fill up the middle gap? How do we make sure that that can function in the best way possible, to make sure that eventually citizens can get the maximum benefit out of it?
So basically, that's another big challenge which has shaped the way systems are designed. The entire digital usage is now moving from a pipeline mode to a platform mode. As rightly said, the cities might not have, individually might not have capacity to design and implement these kinds of complex solutions, which, at the back end may be very complex, but on the front end, they are going to be that much easier for citizens to use.
True.
Even if each of the cities or many of the cities had the capacity, given the fact that, we are a developing country, and also in developed countries, there is no need to develop these systems so many times over. So that is where the role of central government or CCSG comes, where the government may be able to provide a unified, I'm not saying uniform, unified platform with all these common components, which may be the user interface, the IoT engine for interacting with the sensors, the national ID, Jandhan, Aadhaar, and bank account linkage, etc., as the shared common public goods. So all these complex pieces may be built at the national level as a shared good, which each of the cities can just utilize. They can either utilize it free of cost, or they can pay a very minimal amount, which would be at least 1/50th of having to develop these systems on their own. So one of the good examples of that in India, at least, is already there with the government of India announcing National Digital Health Blueprint, which basically provides for a shared common digital infrastructure for keeping your medical records, for accessing telemedicine, for talking to the best doctors, using the same platform, irrespective of which state or city you reside in. You would be able to use this common shared digital platform at a national level. I think a similar thing is being attempted through National Urban Innovation Stack, or NUGP, which is National Urban Governance Platform. And CCSG is the first step in that direction, which is trying to take up some of the services on a priority basis and build this kind of a shared service platform at a national level.
Okay. And then does government here become as an enabler of that ecosystem, or does government become here as a broker of the ecosystem? Where does government come in here?
Two things basically. One, for this kind of a system to work uniformly across the country and provide benefits to multiple cities to use it as a common platform, the government first has a role of setting up and notifying both governance and technology standards, so that any player who wants to be a part of this ecosystem can become a part of this ecosystem without any discrimination, which means that the system should not be monopolized by one player or another. So those kinds of rules will have to be set up by the government. Those kinds of standards will have to be notified. Second, if we know, and we already know, at least in urban, that there are some common elements which are service agnostic. Say, for example, a GIS engine for a city, an IoT engine for interfacing sensors, a data analytics engine for making sense of the data, a common repository or a registry for identity of people through Aadhaar, their bank accounts, another repository for defining the properties of people, as if whether he's a farmer, he's below poverty line, he's above poverty line. Those things could be provided by the government as a shared platform. Now, whether the government wants to do it with their own money, or they want to engage a private player in a PPP mode, it will depend on how the government wants to do it. And also the federal structure of India would also kick in, because as you see in case of GST, the government has been able to create consensus amongst states and then built the system itself and provided it to every state to utilize. Similar is for passport, where you have a common digital platform which is used by all the states. For income tax, we have done that. Yeah. So for whether the government wants to provide, the only difference is GST, income tax, and passports have been central subjects, even if the implementation is at the state level, so they could do it. But urban is something which is not even a state subject. It is one layer below that. So creating consensus on using common platforms or components would be possible only if the government is able to demonstrate the use of that and the benefit of that. But I think if we can't do it for the entire nation at a central level, at least each state can set up these kinds of platforms so that all the cities within the state use a common platform and avoid both duplication and also overcome the problem of capacity at the individual city levels.
Okay. And so, yeah, that is where even I was coming next was, so should we also decentralize the model of, or how can we actually decentralize this model of development as well to a certain extent? Because India being a big country has definitely a lot of challenges in each of its geography, which are different. No doubt we try to create a centralized system or ecosystem for that. It does get very difficult for it. So how can that challenge be taken up by state governments or bigger urban local bodies or in that region to help and cater to the surrounding urban local bodies so that everything can be encompassed, or they can be leader cities of their own and they can help out the remote towns around their cities? How can something work out on that aspect of it?
See, basically, when we talk about an ecosystem, that itself means that nobody is controlling it. It is driven through a shared set of technology standards and the governance rules. As an example, take Amazon. It has an underlying technology piece which is shared by everybody. But on top of that, each vendor is able to decide which product he wants to sell, how does he want to package his project, at what cost does he want to sell. But the underlying supply chain, say, for example, is common. So whether you are a very small vendor or a big vendor, you don't have to worry about the logistics of delivering your product to the end user. So that is provided a common component of that system. The data analytics piece, for example, if somebody has bought, say, a chocolate earlier and you selling chocolates, your product is automatically displayed to that person. So the data analytics, a small vendor in a village making his local chocolates doesn't have to worry about data analytics. So when we are talking about this kind of a national urban service delivery system, or rather than ecosystem, the components of your digital identity in the form of Aadhaar or linking it with your consent, the consent management artifact, using sensors, the IoT engine, etc., are the common platforms which do not require the ecosystem player to invest on that. But if, say, for example, based upon usage of your identity, location, and your income level, some small application provider had to develop a very innovative app, he would have a level playing field with somebody like TCS or Wipro, because the underlying architecture of data analytics, identity linkage, bank account linkage is already provided by the platform. So when we're talking about this ecosystem approach, it is not about controlling, it is about enabling multiple players to provide services by having a uniform and a level playing digital architecture which is equally available to every player irrespective of his size. So when we talk about this national urban innovation stack, we're talking about these artifacts. We're not talking about the applications. The applications would be specific, city specific. Anybody should be able to come in, and the cities would be in a position either to subscribe to some of these hundreds of applications which will be available on the platform, or develop their own applications, put them on the platform and make them available to others to use. So that's the concept.
Okay. And That really sounds like an interesting concept to look at, because it is quite open in its own form, and there will be good amount of cross learnings as well as good amount of competitions I do see as well coming up, which might make the system better as well. So looking on those lines, how do you see a average city? So there will always be some front runners in this whole ecosystem and some who will lag around it on this whole part of digitization. So will it be more citizen based scenario where they will be front runners, or will it be or lagging behind, or will it be adaptation of those state or ULBs where you see major challenge will come in?
See, basically, whenever you do any kind of a new innovation, there are
Hmm.
always front runners and there are always people who join late.
Yeah.
This will happen in this case. So, say, for example, I remember when the mobile phones were launched, the incoming call was 24 rupees a minute and outgoing was also 24 rupees a minute.
Yeah.
So there were few people who basically subscribed to that. But maybe it's a matter of study. If somebody finds out that those would be the people who might have benefited the most by accessing information which was not available to others. Same with internet. But
Yeah.
what happens is once these people who are pioneers take this up and create economies of scales, the systems become more affordable, the interfaces mature, and more people are able to join in. So I think that's how any evolution happens. It is development, it is then reaching a threshold of stimulation, and then more and more people coming in. So this will happen in this case also. The only thing is we can, and Government of India is doing that, Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, where you are reducing the entry barriers for those cities which are considered to be backward or not that tech savvy, by
Hmm.
providing common minimum digital infrastructure to everybody.
Okay.
So today, a city which might be thinking, data analytics or using sensors is a very tough task. I don't have capacity to do it.
Yeah.
But if they know that such a platform is available as a shared public good, and I only have to worry about a small application which is related to my usage on top of that,
Hmm.
might be more people coming in at the beginning itself, because when we say we, the government, either at the central level or state level, would have taken care of most of the complexities and provided a common digital infrastructure to everybody. So
Hmm.
this would, to my mind, this would actually make more people becoming mainstream at a much faster pace than if we implemented the way where we ask each city to do it on their own.
Okay. And then one of the last questions I would have is on the lines of open data. And because this is such a huge amount of data that we are looking at, and a huge amount of information that will come up in terms of habits, which will definitely help if utilized properly by ULBs to cater and maximize their efficiencies on one side. But how does do you think that here open data portals will make more sense for them, or it has to be close to make sure that no misuse of this whole thing is done in any format?
So see, basically, I don't know if you are aware that just about a week back, Government of India has launched something called Data Empowerment and Protection Framework.
Okay.
Uh, DEPA, the paper has been launched by Niti Aayog.
Okay, I'll
This
surely
is
check it out.
still, yeah, this is still at a stage where it is being put out for public consultation. But the basic philosophy of this data empowerment and protection framework is that data should be able to empower citizens, which means that so far we're talking about I will take your data and I ask you to sign on a consent or an agreement which says that I'll use your data, I'll use your contacts, I'll use your pictures, the kind of ones we sign on WhatsApp and everywhere.
Yeah.
This particular framework says that, that power now shifts to the citizen. So,
Okay.
it works on a premise that, we might have people in rural areas
Hmm.
who might be financially poor, but
Hmm.
they might be data rich by way of the data they generate with their transactions or with their activities.
Yeah.
When we empower them to become the owner of that data and then allow multiple agencies to use only that data which is required. Now, when we say that, there are requirements on the government side, and there is lots of data which is basically very much useful or required for the development plans of the country, but may not be very harmful if used. Say, for example, anonymized data about the
Yeah.
income levels of citizens,
Hmm.
or migration of people to know, where people are going and what kinds of jobs may be required. So that data can be put in the open data. When we say open data, it actually means that you convert the data into a machine readable format, taking
Hmm.
out all the personal information, but only leave that information through which some intelligence may be derived for doing evidence-based planning by the governments. So we could open up those data sets where not only governments but private players also can utilize that open data to create new applications and services for citizens, as long as we are able to ensure that the public data of people is not misused. And
Hmm.
that is, I think, very beautifully addressed in this entire data empowerment and protection framework. Once
Hmm.
implemented, I think this will be the first of its kind globally. Such
Okay.
a mature data empowerment framework. It is like turning the entire thing of data privacy around its head, making a citizen owner of his data,
Hmm.
and giving him power to be able to give and withdraw consent on each of its data elements depending upon his own needs, rather than signing a blanket agreement with anybody saying you can use whatever data I have on my phone or on my laptop.
Okay. That sounds very interesting, and I think exciting as well to look out for in digital governance and especially urban governance. So that brings me to the last question on lines of, no doubt a lot of new development is required in tech, in socio-technical aspect as well, that we were talking about with design thinking. And another comes also with policy that you just brought up at the end, that it's very important to make sure that these things are taken into account. So what kind of skill sets do you see would be important in these fields for anyone who's interested in working in this kind of field in future?
Basically, before we come to that, we have to understand one thing that, post this COVID pandemic,
Hmm.
going digital is no more an option.
Yeah.
This has become the new normal. And if you read the global studies, more than 95% jobs in future would require you to have digital skills.
Hmm.
You won't be able to do without them. So one thing which everybody needs to understand is that this new normal is going to be mostly digital. So incidentally,
Yeah.
the government of India policy or the Digital India mission actually said it long back, digital by default,
Yeah.
or mobile first policy, which they, but now post COVID, that is no more an option. It's a compulsion that you would have to not
Yeah.
only do most things digitally, but as I'm saying, even to respond in future to pandemics like this or any other disasters, the
Hmm.
power of being able to utilize data in real time, do predictive modeling, use artificial intelligence, have embedded systems to make sure that citizens are given services on a proactive basis, even if before they can, they reach a stage where recovering becomes very difficult for them. So I think understanding how to utilize digital systems as a minimal level as the users. But if you want to be a professional, learning about digital user interfaces, data analytics, robotics, artificial intelligence, blockchain is going to be hugely. What is being said is that 95% of the jobs would require digital skills, but the kind of digital technologies which are coming would also create additional more than 2 million jobs.
Okay.
The nature of which is not yet known. What is known is that they will be in the digital domain, they would be related to Industry 4.0 technologies. But what would be the jobs, we will know only in the future, once we have embedded systems and all these things becoming mainstream. So I guess one which anybody who's looking for a job, at least in the digital domain, will have to learn is that one, it'll have to be a continuous learning. So if you have the temperament to unlearn and relearn fast, then you should opt for this domain, because the knowledge you acquire today may become obsolete in 6 months or maximum 1 year, and you may have to acquire new knowledge about a new digital system. So one thing, the agile, we've been talking about agile governance and agile working, but I guess agile learning also becomes a new field where you learn about new things that come, and the development is so rapid that that's why they are called disruptive technologies. They would totally disrupt the way we think about governance, we think about service delivery, we think about doing business. Everything is being disrupted by these technologies. And I guess the people who are coming next into their careers or their government jobs would have to not only learn these skills quickly, but will also be need to equally learn the skills of unlearning. I think that will be very important.
But isn't 6 months to 1 year very aggressive when we look at it in the agile practice as well? Because learning, unlearning in a year's time as well is a huge task. And when we are talking about a country like India, which has 1.3 billion people, that's a huge risk in itself. While I would also try to believe on the line that maybe automated systems would have been advanced by that time, but still 1 year learning cycle might be too much for a lot of people. At least that is my thought process on those lines.
Basically, I responded to your question of what skill people will have to learn who want to work in this domain. So end users, that much of unlearning is not required. The system that earlier is intelligent would be intelligent enough to change itself according to the needs, so that the user interface for the end users will remain the same. But those who want to be in a job of designing such systems,
they will have to be adaptive.
So it's not for those who are seeking to use these systems for getting services. They don't have to be that agile and change themselves, because user interface will become so intuitive that the need to learn about IT to use it will become very minimal. But able to design that kind of a system, the kind of skills you would require will change rapidly.
Understood.
So you have to move from digital mobile technologies to nanotechnologies to surface technologies. That is something which is for the professionals who want to come into this field. But for the end users, including our city administrators, etc., who are making policies, etc., it will not be that difficult, because front end would keep on becoming so simple that maybe in 10 years, you don't need to learn about IT to be able to use it. It becomes part of your day-to-day life, the way mobile phones have become.
Yeah, that does sound plausible. And that was very interesting as well, to understand the whole ecosystem of digital urban governance and digital governance. Any last thoughts if you have and would like to share, that would be great.
See, basically, as parting thoughts, I would say that the fact that a new normal has been thrust upon us, let's not look at it as a challenge, but look at it as an opportunity, because we have now, suddenly through this pandemic, got an opportunity to redesign the legacy systems, which without the pandemic would not have become possible. This could have taken another 15 years for the governments to move and change their systems. But the pandemic has now provided that opportunity where you're getting to redesign the entire system. So while redesigning, if we could utilize whatever is available today through Industry 4.0 technologies, we will be able to leapfrog and just bypass an entire era of development and the next level, or maybe catch up with the developed countries, maybe even do better than them, because our burden of legacy systems is much lower than they have. So I think this is a huge opportunity for us to create 21st century systems, because the pandemic has given you that opportunity to use disruptive technologies or disruptive governance methodologies.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that, that we do have to utilize this as an opportunity to make sure that we can scale up at a faster rate. Thank you, Mr. Vikas, for a very interesting conversation about digital urban governance. I really hope that our audience has also enjoyed this talk with us, and I hope that they now know a bit better of what future holds for them in the digital urban governance sector. Thank you.
You have been listening to the U20 Dialogue series. To know more, check out our website u20india.org. Do share the dialogues with your friends and colleagues. Don't forget to follow our social media handles for more information. Stay tuned for our next dialogue.